those God foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the likeness of his Son, and that he might be the firstborn among many brothers. And those he predestined, he also called. And those he called, he also justified. And those he justified, he also glorified.
Good evening. Welcome here. What a break we have from the heat that we've been experiencing for the past few weeks. I'm very grateful for that. Yeah, my name is Shem, and along with this team, we just want you to join us as we worship God in song. But before we do that, I feel like I need to share just an impression that I read in the Bible. There's a story about Jacob running away from his brother Esau because of what he had done. And then he gets to this place called Luz. And he gets a dream, and then he wakes up in the morning and he realizes, he says, this is what he says. He says, God was here and I did not know it. So my point is this: God is here tonight. You might not know it, but he is here. God is here tonight. And another situation, David in the desert of Judea, he says these words: my soul thirsts for you, God, and my flesh yearns for you in a dry and a weary land where there is no water. Thus I have beheld you, I've seen you in the sanctuary. So I don't know where you are. If you're running away from something, God is here. If you're in a dry place where there seems to be no water, God is here to be beheld. God creates a sanctuary in a desert. He can create a sanctuary in whatever desert you might be feeling you're in right now. And David goes on to say, because your loving kindness, that's the word mercy, because your loving kindness is greater than life, I will praise you. I will lift up my hands unto you. So if you're in a dry place, God's calling you to be persuaded that his loving kindness, his mercy is greater than your life. If you're feeling great this morning, his mercy is greater than your life. Wherever you are, God's mercy is always far greater. And so that's the reason we sing. That's the reason we can sing in a desert. That's the reason we can sing when things are well. That's the reason we can sing when we're in confusion. Because his mercy never fails. His mercy never fails. So let's stand to our feet and let's rejoice at the mercy of God, at who God is, that he would be merciful to us day in and day out. Let's sing Better Than Life.
just, oh Lord, you're just in all your ways. And I will lift my hands, oh Lord, with gratitude and praise for your loving kindness. Loving kindness is better than life. Sing it out. Oh, it's better. Oh, better than life. Oh, so
we're going to continue the spirit of worship as we give today to the Lord. And you can mail in, or you can text in. There's several ways to give. Again, the Bible says that it's what we've set apart to the Lord to give to Him, what we've determined in our heart, that we might give joyfully. I pray that we're able to do that right now as we sing this song, Be Thou My Vision.
Say that thou art, thou my best thought, by day or by night, waking or sleeping, thy presence mine. Be thou my wisdom. Riches I heed not. Riches I heed not. Lands and deep waves, thou mine inheritance, thou and always, thou and thou only, me first in my heart. King of heaven, my treasure thou art. My King of heaven, my King of heaven, my victory won. May I reach heaven's joys, oh bright heaven's sun. Heart of my own heart, whatever befall, still be my vision, oh ruler of all. Heart of my own heart, heart of my own heart, whatever befall, still be my vision, oh ruler of all.
Amen. What a blessed night tonight. Let's take a seat.
Elder is tired. Blood streaming from the right eye of Elder. And he gets whacked there again by Bert. Again! And Bert is in big trouble. Holding on for his life here. Stevie's not going to make it. If you got to stop it, there's the left. Unbelievable, stunning turn of events. Reversal of fortune by Evo Elder.
I spent most of my life in the sport of boxing, fighting for a living. And you know what that's like, because the truth is, we're all in a fight. We're all fighting to overcome fear of COVID-19. We're all fighting to overcome depression and anxiety. We're all fighting for our marriages and to raise good kids and put them through college. We're all in a fight. And maybe right now you feel like you're down on the mat and there's no hope for victory. I want you to know, I believe God has a great comeback in store for you.
I thank you for this gladiator, this man with such heart, such skill, such determination. Nothing in the natural is worth anything. Only a relationship with you, the Father, the God of the earth. That's all that matters, Lord.
Hey everyone, join us for our last Saturday night of the summer. Saturday, August 29th, 7 p.m. Ebo Elder's going to be with us, former middleweight boxer and reality TV show host, and a really good friend of mine. Ebo has a fabulous testimony of turning his life around, and he has a brand new book out called The Comeback. So not only is this a great invite for people that are kind of out there struggling, but people who have actually crashed and burned, and they will discover there's a God who can rebuild them. So join us out on the lawn. We have a food court, wonderful time, rain or shine. We'll see you Saturday the 29th, 7 p.m.
What does it mean to be human?
I'm just so sick of being. Yeah.
I can move. I can talk.
There's something to personhood other than just all being members of the same species, right?
If we don't know what it means to be human, what does humanism mean?
And I want you to remember, there is a human story behind every person that you meet.
Am I a real boy?
Tell me why I still feel lost. Tell me why I still feel.
If we do not answer the question what it means to be human, we'll never be able to answer the question what it means to be good or what it means to be evil.
Well, guys, my name is Mike Guaglione, if we've never met. If we haven't met, I am... Whoa, I got a little applause. Great. Okay. My name is Mike Guaglione. If we haven't met, if we have never met, I'd be happy to meet you. I don't know how things work these days. Do I shake your hand? Do I fist bump? Do we foot tap? But any way that you want to, I'd be happy to meet you after the service. Most of you guys probably know I'm Pastor Bob Guaglione's son. Pastor Bob's not here this week. He's on vacation. In August, what we'd like to do is kind of push him out the door and give him some time. And so I'm happy to give him the time. And I'm happy to be with you guys tonight. If you're just joining us and you haven't been here for the last couple weeks, we're going through a 4-week series, or 5 or 6 week series actually, called Being Human. That's what that fancy video is for. And it's a character study through the life of David. And David's a great character to study what it means to be human, because there's this breadth and depth to his humanity that it's just a lot to wrap your head around. And so it feels like you can kind of study him through the ups and downs. But it was funny when Calvary asked me to talk about being human through the perspective of David. I had to laugh because I just feel like that's such a funny question, right? Being human. David doesn't feel very human. He feels kind of like a superhero. And so I reread the story of David, just went through 1st and 2nd Samuel, and I was like, oh my gosh, geez, like, this guy's not human. I mean, he's anointed to be king at 16 years old. It reminded me a little bit of the Gladiator story. You guys remember that movie with Russell Crowe? It's one of my favorite movies. I remember the trailer said, the tagline was, the general who became a slave, the slave who became a gladiator, the gladiator who defied an emperor. And David's story is like that, except it's actually like a little bit cooler. It's the shepherd boy who became a hero, the hero who became a fugitive, and the fugitive who became a king. And so I'm like looking at these chapters, and I'm trying to get some kind of relational currency with David, and I'm like, he's just way too cool for me. I traced the narrative back, and I was like, all right, so anointed to be king at 16 or 17 years old, 17 or 18 kills Goliath, and he's parading through the streets, and they're saying, Saul has slain his thousands and David his tens of thousands at 17 years old. And I Googled, how cool was King David, just to kind of like see what the internet was saying. And I came across this like BuzzFeed type article that said 14 things that you never knew about King David. And I was like, oh, try me. So I'm going through, and point number 3 said this. I copied and pasted it. Point number 3 said, David was a stud. Apparently that was like worth knowing in this article. David was a stud. David means beloved of both God and humankind, especially women. It was women who used to chant, Saul has slain his thousands and David his tens of thousands. And so I'm like, all right, how do I relate to David? He's this guy where at 17, he's paraded through the streets and they're saying, Saul has slain his thousands, iconic hero. And then I was like, what was I doing at 17? And I started to think back, and the two memories that popped into my head, and I have no idea what Freudian reason these popped into my head, but the first thing I thought was I remember at 17, I was on the basketball team, but there was an hour and a half gap between leaving school and having practice. And so I would go walk by Wawa on the way home, and I would get a bag of Entenmann's chocolate donuts and a half gallon of milk. And I would go into my basement, I would play this game called Empire Earth. And I would just be clicking away, just throwing donuts into the back of my mouth and then chugging this half gallon of milk. And then after that, I would go to practice, and I'd probably throw up. And that was one thing that I was doing around the time that David was kind of becoming a national hero. And then the other thing is I started to, I was telling the story a couple weeks ago about a girlfriend that I had. It was my first girlfriend. I was 17. Her name was Jackie, and she was super cute. And I was like so happy to be in this relationship. But we're driving home one night. We're 2 months into it. It's my first try at romance. And she starts like kind of having this breakup conversation with me. And I remember she kept saying, you're not treating this serious enough. And I was kind of scratching my head because I was like, man, I like her, and like, how am I not treating this serious enough? I was like trying to explain to her. I was like, listen, I call you my girlfriend around my friends. I pick you up after school. I pay for ice cream when we go out to get it. Like, I feel like I do all of the things a 17-year-old should do. And she was just adamant that I was not taking it seriously enough, and so that ended. So she breaks up with me, and I just was like, all right. And so we, I thought we would never talk again. My dad comes into my room 3 days later, and he says, hey, my mom told me that you and Jackie broke up. And I was like, yeah. And he goes, well, did you call to see how she's doing? And I was like, what? I don't know. I guess because I had watched so many movies or whatever, you never talked again, so I didn't know. Like, he was like, well, I mean, she's a human being. Like, you should call her and see how she's doing. So I run to the phone, and I'm like, Don, I'm like, hey. And she goes, hey. And I was like, I'm just calling to see how you're doing. And she was like, I really wish you would have called 3 days ago. And I was like, dang it. And I've always felt like a late bloomer, I like can't really figure it out. Like I learned to shave too late. I learned everything like too late in life. And so I'm comparing my ordinary basic life with this extraordinary life of King David. And I'm like, I don't see where the overlap is. But thankfully, there's a novelist, Leslie Jameson. Leslie Jameson is an award-winning novelist from New York, and she said something that I will never forget, and I'll carry it with me for the rest of my life. She said, she wrote a memoir. She was an alcoholic, and she wrote a memoir of her road to recovery. And she said, being in those recovery meetings, she went to AA, being in those recovery meetings was so interesting because her goal as a novelist is to tell the most unique story in the world. That's the reason why people buy a novel. But when you go into AA, the goal there is to tell the same story over and over and over again. I'm Bob. I'm an alcoholic. This is my journey to recovery. I'm Jane. I'm an alcoholic. This is my journey to recovery. And she started to realize, this light bulb went off in her head, and she started to realize there's actually something so inspiring about hearing that somebody has done basically two things, has been there before, and that you're not alone. And so that was the thing that that was what she realized. Somebody needs to hear the same story over and over and over again, because in those critical moments, what they need to hear is you're not alone and somebody's been there before. And so it's funny because if you leave some of the epicness of David behind and you go to things like the Psalms, or you start to read in between the lines, you start to see some other stuff that maybe you didn't see before. And that's what I really, really liked about exploring David. It's almost like David 2.0. Once you move past the superficiality of some of the felt board stories, you get into who David really was, how he was so human. And, I think about when he was in the desert. So he's had like this great experience so far, and he's walked through killing Goliath and, becoming the national hero. And then all of a sudden he's on the run as a fugitive. And he's in the desert, and I don't know if you know this, but David was in the desert for a decade. And that's when he wrote Psalm 63. Psalm 63 goes like this: God, my God, earnestly I seek you. I thirst for you. My whole being longs for you in a dry and parched land where there's no water. That's human. And I don't know, there's probably people on this lawn who feel like God has given you promises or you've been faithful in something and you're just not seeing breakthrough. It feels like a desert. And David's basically here with that psalm to say, you're not alone and somebody's walked down that road before. I also thought about David and Bathsheba. You remember when Nathan comes to David and he says, hey, secret's out, and David confesses his sin. Remember the child that he had with Bathsheba falls ill. And so for a couple of days, David is just laying prostrate in front of the crib as this baby is dying, and he's saying, God, will you have mercy on this baby? He's fasting and he's praying and he's just hoping against hope that God has mercy on this baby. And how many people on this lawn have had to deal with the fact that while you do know that you're forgiven for sin, that there are repercussions to it, and they kind of ripple out from us. And so David is there to tell you, you're not alone. Somebody's walked through that before. There's also the story of Absalom. Absalom is David's son. He stages a revolt against David, and there's civil war in Jerusalem. And so David's men fight Absalom's men, and Absalom's killed in that process. And when they bring the news to David, they say, when they tell David that Absalom's died, David runs into the palace and he throws himself on the floor and he says, Absalom, Absalom, my son, oh, that I would have died instead of you. And how many people on this lawn have someone they dearly, dearly love, or a child who they feel like they did all the right things and they gave them the right foundation, but that person is long gone, whether that's physically, spiritually, or emotionally. David is there as a human being to say, you're not alone, and somebody's walked through that before. And so I just felt like tonight we kind of would leave the big stories behind and move into like what is between the lines in David's story. What is David when he's really, really human, the way that we are, through all the painful experiences, through the true ups and downs? How does he actually feel? And so I almost want to like imagine, like as Leslie Jameson wrote, like imagine that we are in that AA type meeting scenario. It's like dusty basement, folding chairs and styrofoam cups. And David's there, and he's just going to tell us his story of what it means to be human. And tonight, what we're going to talk about is what it means to be ambitious. What does it mean to be ambitious? Couple things that I think that we should probably say right off the bat. I'm gonna read from Psalm 131, and that's the scripture that I'm going to use throughout the night. If you're a page turner, you're going to have a hard time following me because I'm going to go through the whole story of David. And don't worry, we're not going to be here till 10 o'clock at night. But I'm going to go pretty fast. But if you want to keep your Bible in one place, I feel like Psalm 131 is the space. Imagine we're all around in a circle and we say, David, what are your thoughts around ambition? Here's what I think David would say to us. This is from the Message translation. He says, God, I'm not trying to rule the roost. I don't want to be king of the mountain. I haven't meddled where I have no business or fantasized grandiose plans. I've kept my feet on the ground. I've cultivated a quiet heart. Like a baby content in its mother's arms, my soul is a baby content. Wait, Israel, for God. Wait with hope, hope now, and hope always. I want to say right off the bat that I think ambition is a good thing. I think it's biblical, and I think that God designed it. And so this won't be a sermon where we knock ambition. It's actually just going to be a sermon where we talk about how do we direct our ambitions in the right place. The idea is that there's healthy ambition and there's unhealthy ambition. One thing that I think that that would be really obvious is that David is an ambitious person. One of the ways we know that is because he's so accomplished. It would be hard to accomplish what David did in his lifetime without being ambitious, right? I was reflecting on this and I was thinking, I don't know if there's a historical character that has accomplished as much in his or her lifetime as David did. I just don't think that there is, especially when you consider where he came from. He starts as a shepherd. He ends as a king, unifies Israel, brings it to his apex. On the side, he has this side gig as probably the most famous artist of all time. The poems that he wrote in the Psalms and some of the songs that are still sung today, definitely the most sung artist in all of history. And then also, besides being king, he's also probably the most popular warrior. He definitely has the most popular battle of all time in David and Goliath. He was undefeated, And I think historically he goes down in history as one of the greatest warriors. So there's this person who has accomplished quite a bit in his life, and it would be hard to argue that he wasn't ambitious. The other thing I think is that I think God's ambitious. Why do I say that? I think it was ambitious to make us. And I mean that in the best way possible. I'm complimenting you. If you understand the Trinity, there's this 3-in-1 aspect to who God is, and there's perfect communion and perfect love in that. And so there's actually no reason to introduce anything else. There's no need. So I would consider it kind of ambitious to create a whole universe and to put people inside of it that can choose to love or reject love. That's an ambitious venture to have taken on. And so I actually think that God is ambitious. The other thing is I actually like ambitious people. I live in New York City. And I love the city just for the energy and the momentum that the city carries. I think it's like an amazing place to just like, it's always like teeming with life. Frank Sinatra said, you know, if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere. Jay-Z said, it's the concrete jungle where dreams are made of. There's nothing you can't do. New York is like it's just this wheelhouse of ambition, and I kind of just love to see it. I was on a bike trip 2 weeks ago. I took some guys from the city, and we biked from Boston to Portland, Maine. And it was really funny because a lot of these guys hadn't biked very much before. And so we did 150 miles in 3 days. And everybody was wiped and beat, but we were like really happy to have done it. And I just got a text from one of them last night. He texted me, my friend Tyler texted me, and he said, hey, in 2021 we're doing this. And he sent a link to a 100-mile ride through New York City all in a day. It's called a Century Ride. And something just kind of wakes up in me with people like that. I love ambitious people. I love people who are like ready to tackle the next thing. James K. Smith said this, and I feel like this kind of like just puts a bow on the whole idea. He says, if you keep walking around the phenomenon of ambition, you'll start to note a couple of features. First, the opposite of ambition is not humility. It's sloth, passivity, timidity, and complacency. We sometimes like to comfort ourselves by imagining that the ambitious are prideful and arrogant, so that those of us who never risk, never aspire, never launch out into the deep, get to wear the moralizing mantle of humility. But this imagining is often just a thin cover for a lack of courage. Playing it safe isn't humble. Playing it safe isn't humble. And God didn't design us, and there's nothing that you'll read in the Bible that talks about ever playing it safe. We were designed to be ambitious people. But I think one of the things that we all understand in our culture is that ambition, when directed in the wrong place, can go in 1,000 different wrong directions. And Eugene Peterson captured this idea for me, kind of crystallized it. He said that there's always some type of temptation in a place and time in history that seems to be a greater temptation than everything else. And he said in the West, and specifically in America, I think that temptation is ambition. And the reason that you know is because they flipped it, where some people would consider parts of ambition, or especially unhealthy ambition, to be a vice. It's kind of flipped into a virtue in our culture. He said this, one temptation that has received special treatment in Western civilization, with some special flourishes in America, is ambition. Our culture encourages and rewards ambition without qualification. We're surrounded by a culture in which betterment is understood as expansion, as acquisition, as fame. To be on top, no matter what the top is admired. There's nothing recent about the temptation. It's the oldest sin in the book, the one that got Adam and Eve thrown out of the garden and Lucifer tossed out of heaven. What is fairly new about it is the general admiration and approval that it receives. And I think that that's the felt reality. We kind of get that in our culture, right? Michael Jordan is the icon of ambition. If you guys watched the Michael Jordan documentary a couple months ago, every time that somebody asked him, well, what about like this relationship that was compromised? What about this with your teammates? He always had this answer. Well, I wanted to win. And it's almost like that's the grand excuse. As long as you want to win, then you have permission. And we iconicize people like that, and we put them on shoes, and there's your jump man. Just do it. That is what the pinnacle of what we can achieve in culture is. We're ambitious people in the West. But it's interesting because like I said, there's healthy and unhealthy ambition, or you could use these terms. There's a worldly ambition and there's a holy ambition. And obviously, if you're a believer on the lawn tonight and you're ambitious about anything in life, you want to have a holy ambition. You don't want to have a worldly ambition. And the important thing to remember about ambition And almost every other key desire in life is that there's always something behind that, right? I've been really obsessed with this book. If anybody wants to write it down, I think it's well worth reading. It's James K. Smith, and it's called On the Road with St. Augustine. And what he does is he fuses this existentialist novel by Jack Kerouac, On the Road, with Augustine's Confessions, and basically says, where do these two lines intersect? What do we do with our longings? And so each of the chapters, I love the way he broke them down. Each of them is a longing, and then there's a question underneath of it. So when you go through the chapters, it'll be like, friendship is the name, but the question is, what do I want when I want to belong? He goes through freedom. What do I want when I want to feel liberated? Sex. What do I want when I want intimacy? Or death. What do I want when I want to really live? And I took this way too far in my life. I read it a couple months ago. And now every time somebody asks for anything, I keep asking them, well, what's the question behind that question? So we'll be at like a party now, and people will be like, man, it's getting kind of late. Should we order a pizza for everybody? And I'll be like, what do you want when you want pizza? But listen, once you've heard it, you're going to start doing it too. Honestly, it's a really interesting question to say, what do I want when I say that I actually want something? He has a chapter on there about ambition, and here's the question. What do I want when I want to be noticed? What do I want when I want to be noticed? And he goes further and he kind of breaks down what ambition actually is. And he says ambition is built on these two pillars. I want to win, and I want to be noticed for winning. That's what worldly ambition looks like. I want to win, and I want to be noticed for winning. And you'll know that this is you because if you ever have something that you're pretty good at, but people don't really notice you for it because they don't value it, you don't care very much that you're good at it. So I don't know, if we lived in a society where stamp collecting was like this major thing, then a couple of you guys would be a little bit more noticeable, right? But it's like we live in a society that values other things, so you don't really care much about stamp collecting. It's like we don't just want to win. We're not happy with winning. We need to be noticed for winning. Worldly ambition says, I want to win and I want to be noticed. And so what's true is that a holy ambition just kind of tweaks that a little bit. Holy ambition is, I want God to win and I want God to be noticed. Worldly ambition says, I want to win and I want to be noticed. Godly ambition says, I want God to win and I want God to be noticed. The truth is, in my short life that's getting longer every day, I think the thing that I've found to be most true is that God is always looking for people who care about what he cares about, and he's ready to use you as long as you care about what he cares about. And I feel like if you were going to reflect on the entire life of David, he would agree wholeheartedly with this idea of ambition. Founded in Psalm 131, he basically says all the central tenets of it, and he would just look at us and he would say, listen, if you are living your life where you want to win and you want to be noticed, it's never going to work. I've lived my whole life and lived this epic adventure with God, and the entire time it was I want God to win and I want God to be noticed. I don't know that I need to prove it to you, but this is a sermon, and this is how stuff works, so I guess I have to go through all of the scriptures and kind of point this out to you. But you see it through the entire David narrative. So if you start at Samuel 16, at 1 Samuel 16, just work your way through, you will find this time and time and time again. So I picked 3 out for us just because. The David and Goliath story, everybody knows it. And you'll remember that when David goes, this is the first time you actually hear David speak. It's when Goliath is kind of saying all his, talking all his trash to the Israelites. And David goes, who is that talking trash about God? He's actually offended on behalf of God's reputation, right? And when he finally is down in the valley with Goliath, you remember Goliath says all of his stuff. He says, I'm going to do this to you, this to you, this to you, feed your body to the birds, and all the stuff they used to say back then. And then David comes back at him. But listen to what David said. Goliath's been all I. David says, this is in 1 Samuel 17:45. David said to the Philistine, you come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I'll strike you down and cut off your head. This very day I will give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds and the wild animals. And listen to this, the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. All those gathered here will know that it is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will deliver you all into our hands. That's what David says, right? David's posture is simple. I want God to win, and I want God to be noticed. If you move into the time that David's actually in the desert, right? Everybody knows David's running around the desert for like a decade, and there's 2 times that he spares Saul's life as he's running from him. The first time he catches Saul going to the bathroom, and he just cuts off like a little piece of his cape, right? Shows it to him a little bit later, and he says, hey, listen, I could have killed you, but I didn't. Saul's like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. That was a huge favor. And he's like, I'm not going to chase you anymore. Great, they part ways. And then, like, who knows, maybe 6 months or a year later, Saul's out to find him again. So it comes into this epic moment. I think this is around Samuel 26, where Saul's camped on one side of the mountain, and David is on the other side. And in the middle of the night, David kind of sneaks over into Saul's camp. He's trying to get the lay of the land, and he finds Saul there sleeping. And David's with one of his armor bearers, and that armor bearer looks at David and he goes, let me run a spear through him right now. And you have to imagine in David's shoes then, you're thinking, oh my gosh, it can all be over, right? God promised this to me when I was 16. Now I'm 26, 27, who knows? And I'm running around the desert, and I wake up every day not knowing if I'm going to make it, and I can end it all tonight, walk into Jerusalem tomorrow as anointed king, and this is all over. Interesting to see what he says. He says to the man, as surely as the Lord lives, the Lord himself will strike him, or his time will come and he will die, or he will go into battle and perish. But the Lord forbid that I should lay a hand on God's anointed. So David looks at the guy and he goes, nope, hands off. I know what God's promised me. I know that there's a way that I think this is supposed to go. But as for Saul, he may die of old age, and I'm going to be really old too. He may die getting sick, or he may be struck down in battle, but there's no way that I'll lay a hand on this person. Because at the end of the day, this is God's story. What does God want to do with the nation of Israel? I want God to win, and I want God to be noticed, not my story. Probably my favorite one is when David flees Jerusalem. This is in 2 Samuel 15. And this is like an off the beaten path. This is like a deep cut Bob Dylan song. Nobody reads 2 Samuel 15. This is when David is fleeing Jerusalem. So Absalom, his son, has started a rebellion, and they're about to kind of sack the city. And David gets out of there last minute. And so he's on his way out, and he looks over, and the priests are walking out too, and they have the Ark of the Covenant with them. And it's interesting, because like you guys know that David loved the Ark of the Covenant. He was the king who brought it back. Remember, he got in trouble for dancing naked around it, right? Like, David loved the Ark. And the Ark was like, it's the place where the presence of God dwelled. And so sometimes the Israelites would carry it into battle. It was almost like a lucky charm, you know? It was this idea that, man, if we bring this into battle, God's got to catch 22. Because even if we haven't been like right with him, his presence is there. And so, you know, if the enemies kind of overtake us, they take his presence, which is super awkward. So he just got to let us win the battle. And so they would carry the Ark of the Covenant into battle. So that's why these priests are walking out of the city with the Ark of the Covenant, basically like, David, you're the guy, and this is super messed up. So bring the presence of God with you, and then you'll probably be fine. This is what David says. This is in 2 Samuel 15. He says, then David said to Zadok, the priest, carry the Ark of God back into the city. If I find favor in the eyes of the Lord, he will bring me back and let me see both it and his dwelling place. But if he says, I have no pleasure in you, behold, here I am. Let him do to me what seems good to him. And David basically looks at them and he says, listen, I don't need a lucky charm. I was anointed when I was 16, and I had a lot of dreams for the way this was going to work out, and I had no idea that 20 or 30 years later, I'd be in the middle of a civil war in this city. But God's going to do what he's going to do. And I'm just like literally surrendered at his feet. That's the posture of David in this. He says, I want God to win. If God's going to bring me back into the city, if I'm going to see that ark again, I want God to win, and I want God to be noticed for winning. And so I feel like if we were in that, you know, I mean, let's go back into the basement in our little AA meeting, right? Folding chairs and styrofoam cups. And just hearing some of the stories that David's telling. I just kind of think, like, as he would have walked through this narrative, there would be the questions that we would ask somebody as prolific and historic as David. Is David, throughout all the undulations, through everything, through these ups and downs, these crazy moments that you have, what was your secret sauce? What was the Maxwell books that you read? What were the mentors that you had? What were the leadership traits that you cultivated? And how did you get the grit? how did you Michael Jordan your career becoming shepherd boy to king? And what I really, really think David would do if he was in that chair is he would just say, I said it in Psalm 131. I'll read it again. God, I'm not trying to rule the roost. I don't want to be king of the mountain. I haven't meddled where I have no business or fantasized grandiose plans. I've kept my feet on the ground. I've cultivated a quiet heart. Like a baby content in its mother's arms, my soul is a baby content. Wait, Israel, for God. Wait with hope. Hope now, hope always. And so maybe he kind of turns the question back to us. And he says, what do you do when you're in those moments? I have to believe that there's a lot of ambitious people on the lawn tonight. Why wouldn't you be? You've got to be kind of ambitious. You're coming to church when nobody else is coming to church. Right? And everybody here has dreams. Everybody's trying to be somebody. Everybody wants to be known for something. We all want to be seen. It's like just a core human desire in the heart. We want to be seen. And I just think about all the things that we're trying to tackle, all the stuff that we're trying to do. Do we have this mindset? I want God to win. I want God to be noticed. Or is the fundamental framework that we operate with, I want to win and I want to be noticed for winning? I don't know what it looks like for you. It may be that, you pursue a certain career that gets you to a certain income level so that you have a car and you have a house and, these status symbols qualify you as a person who's legit. It may be that you have been doing TikTok dances for the last couple weeks and you're really trying to go viral and it's not working. I don't know, there's a lot of people with a lot of dreams in life. But it's funny because as I've been reflecting on this, I've been kind of challenged in my own life personally. I'm 33, and so one of the things that I kind of feel like I've learned at this age is I actually don't really know how to make myself very happy when I plan things my own way. I don't know if you've ever been there, but it's this idea that it's like, man, you kind of think that something out there is going to satisfy. And one day when you do that, when you win, then you'll be noticed, and then being noticed will be what you needed, and then you do it, and then it's never enough. Or more often than not, like in my life, you don't even do it. And then you're noticed for not doing it. And it's funny because you find yourself in those moments and you start to realize, man, this isn't really it. I remember hearing a celebrity who was getting interviewed, and they asked him this question. They said, when you were starting your career, what's one of the things that you really would have loved to have known? And he said, I would have loved to have known that when I got to the top, there was nothing there. And somebody commented on that, and they said, yeah, that might be true, but I'd at least like to see for myself. But we hear that all the time, right? We hear that all the time. It's like the thing that you're fighting for, the thing that you're just trying to bar your way into a room. You're trying to get into a circle of people that you could know. You're trying to get to a place where it's like, look at me, look at me, look at me. And we live our lives this way, and the culture is just designed around this. And the question that you have to ask yourself is it actually fulfilling? And I think that the reason I turned to Psalm 131 is because I feel like David would be shaking his head at most of the stuff we're doing, which is ironic because David has one of the most epic stories ever told. But that's the thing, is I actually think that when you live life God's way, when you have godly ambition, when you want God to win and you want God to be noticed for winning, everything starts to expand. It's like life gets bigger and better and more creative and more fulfilling. And I've seen this in so many dimensions of my life. I was actually trying to think through some big grand example of who is in culture really followed the leading of the Lord, and then something explosive happened. They started to live this bigger life. And I was like, I actually don't think that I need to move past just the people in this church, because I've seen a lot of you guys do exactly this. I've seen you surrender and say, God, I want you to win and I want you to be noticed. And I've seen fruit come from that in this expansive life. It's funny. C.S. Lewis has this picture that he always uses of sin being small and living life God's way being huge. And so if you've ever read The Great Divorce, there's heaven and hell in the Great Divorce, and the people take the bus from hell to go visit heaven every day. And it's really funny because the bus doesn't go to hell, it just grows to hell. C.S. Lewis's idea was that hell is so small because those desires that we have, those carnal desires that we have, are so small, they just look like a speck in heaven. And so when people travel to heaven from hell, they take the bus and it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And what he was saying is sin is small, but God's plan for us is huge. It's bigger, it's better, it's more creative, it's more fulfilling than you would ever imagine. He says this, and this is one of the most famous C.S. Lewis quotes of all time. If you've heard it, just hear it again and let it soak into your spirit. He says, "We are half-hearted creatures, fooling around with drink and sex and ambition when infinite joy is offered us. Like an ignorant child who wants to go on making mud pies in a slum because he cannot imagine what is meant by the offer of a holiday at the sea. We are just far too easily pleased," he says. And Eugene Peterson said, he goes, all of human history is basically this idea of sweatily trying to knock together a Tower of Babel when God already gave us Eden to live in. And for some reason, we want to chase this smallness in life when the bigness is offered. And I was thinking about, like I said, I was thinking about some people here in this church. And Danielle's here tonight. Where are you at, Danielle? Yeah. Danielle, I met Danielle probably 5 years ago or something, right? By this time, maybe even more, who knows. But I was thinking about her and her heart for Guatemala. She went to Guatemala years ago. I don't even know if I have the story perfect, but what I do know is she's a dental hygienist, went to Guatemala, and saw what the kids were experiencing in the dumps. The dumps are huge trash dumps that these barefoot kids pick through trying to get dead batteries and some plastics to resell. And they live this life that, you honestly couldn't even imagine. They literally live on a trash heap. And Danielle went down there and she was like, I just can't tolerate that these kids don't have their teeth cleaned. I'm the dental hygienist. That's the only thing I really kind of feel like I can offer. And so she went back and she raised a ton of money to bring a dental clinic to these trash dumps. And it's crazy because I got to go, we brought a team of like 20 or 30 people down this last February. And I got to go and it was just nuts to see Danielle cleaning kids' teeth who probably have never had their teeth cleaned in their entire life. And we brought down hairstylists. And so these little girls who literally barefoot are picking through this trash dump got their hair cut by professional stylists for the first time. And all of these like amazing things. And I was looking at Danielle and I was thinking, oh my gosh, how big is her life when she wants God to win and she wants God to be noticed? And how small would it have been? I don't know what else you would have done in your spare time, Danielle, but you probably would have, I don't know, like maybe placed a few more hygienists or whatever, and maybe her condo would have an extra 400 square feet, or maybe her car would have a nicer emblem on it. But you think about how small that life is compared to that, and how many lives she's touched by the people who went to Guatemala here, and how many lives in Guatemala she's touched, and the ripple effect that just goes out when you want God to win and you want God to be noticed. I was thinking about my sister. My sister's a really smart, super intelligent, career-driven woman, and she just heard from God that she needed to stay home with her kids. And that's still in the process. And I know a lot of you guys have kids, and you know how that can be. There's so many parents who have sacrificed their career for the sake of their children's development and seeing their children grow. And I just think when that's all said and done, you'll look at this and say, oh my gosh, the bigness of what God had when I wanted God to win in my child's life and when I wanted God to be noticed, versus some career where I made, an extra $100,000 or something like that. I thought about Innovate. Some of the teachers here at Innovate Academy. And some of the teachers here are so good. I know some of them personally, and I was like, oh my gosh, these guys could teach in any school district anywhere. They're great. And they decide to be here, probably not making the same amount of money, probably not getting the same benefits and tenure that a lot of those teachers get in those great school districts, but they've got this thing where they really want to see children's lives transformed by classical Christian education. They want God to win, and they want God to be noticed for winning. And, and then just apply that lens to your own life. What is it for you? What are you doing right now? What are you interested in? What are you driving towards? Where is God in that? And I just want to discourage you from one thing. I think a lot of times it's David was anointed and he was king and all that type of stuff. So that applies to him. And I don't know, maybe Danielle's super spiritual. So, I'll factor that out. I'm just a normal guy, working 9 to 5, white collar job, blue collar job, I don't know. So I don't really have anything to be ambitious about. I want to just say this. Remember, David started as a shepherd. And listen, I'm the 9 to 5 guy too. I get it. I I work right now. I used to go to an office. I put on my collar shirt. I work from home at my kitchen table now, like probably all of you guys do. But I'm there every day, just grinding away, and I think like we've got our areas that we can explore, and we've got to figure out what those are supposed to be. I don't know what that looks like for you, but I know that this psalm is what speaks to me. I look at this and I say, God, I'm not trying to rule the roost. Step one. I don't want to be king of the mountain. I haven't meddled where I have no business or fantasized grandiose plans. I've kept my feet on the ground. I've cultivated a quiet heart. Like a baby content in my mother's arms, my soul is a baby content. Wait. If you're asking David, how did you tackle this big thing? How did you go on that epic adventure? How did you navigate this circumstance? David's answer would always be the same. I cultivated a quiet heart. I was like a baby when it came to God. Just wait. I don't know what waiting looks like for you. I feel like everybody's got their own relationship with God and you figure it out. I know people who are kind of on all ends of the spectrum. They put on crazy worship songs and they dance around. They've got flags and they do their thing. And then I know people who would think that was totally weird and they don't even, they're just like, oh, I just read the scripture every day or whatever. For me, I live in New York on the Upper West Side and I'm 2 avenues from the river. And so for me, cultivating a quiet heart and being like a baby in God's arms and just offering my 9 to 5 and my life is basically just going down to the river early in the morning and I just sit there and I literally do wait. I wait and just say, there's different dimensions that I explore every day. God, here's my career. This is what it looks like. This is what I've been trying to do. What will you take of it and do what you want to do with it? I want you to win and I want you to be noticed in what I do for work. Relationally, God, these are my people. These are the people that I feel like you've given me. I don't really know what next steps to take, but I want you to win in their lives and I want you to be noticed in their lives. I just want to partner with you in that. Any different facet of your life. If you have kids, it's like whatever that looks like, it's the constant prayer. God, I want you to win and I want you to be noticed. How can you use me in just raising these kids? Or if there's like some super crazy ministry idea that you've always had, a way of reaching people, a way of making the world better. God, I want you to win and I want you to be noticed for winning. I read this story a couple years ago, and it's a story that it's a story out of a Donald Miller book. Donald Miller is a pretty famous Christian author. He wrote Blue Like Jazz probably 10 or 15 years ago, and kind of like really hit it off in the Christian scene. Everybody loves him. He's so honest and all that type of stuff. And he's wrote a bunch of best-selling books since then. Has become a super popular Christian author. 5 years ago, I read this book called Scary Close, and he told a story in here about a pastor that he grew up with. It was the pastor who told him, it was the first person in his life who told him, hey, you're a really good writer. You should cultivate that gift. And he talks about this pastor that was very transformative to him, and he says, he's the greatest guy in the world. He's also super talented. He was a great communicator. He was charming. He was good looking. He kind of had all of the things that would make you special. He was like, he could have been like this epic pastor where he grew up in Texas. But he kind of never did. Like he never became that person that Donald Miller thought he could be. And the reason is because he was kind of like, every time he could have stepped into the limelight, he was always taking a step back and doing something that was like counterintuitive, something like way different that you felt like God was calling him to. So anyway, Donald Miller gets a call one day. Apparently he died in a car accident. And the family has called him. They said, hey, we wanted to know if you would speak at his funeral and give him a eulogy. And so Donald Miller flies back to Texas, and he kind of has this moment where he's at the hotel room and he's thinking about the eulogy he has to give. And I want you to listen to what he says. He says, I wish I could say that I admired him for the way he lived, but I wanted him to have had a little money and a car that worked. And I wanted him to have enjoyed the pleasures of life a man of his talent deserved. I felt like I knew a guy who could hit a home run anytime he went to bat, but he'd never even tried to play the game. When he was alive, I'd ask him a dozen times to write a book, so he'd start one and then get bored and lose interest. Instead, he'd start a recovery program for addicts. I spent the day before David's funeral in a hotel room. This is David, not David from the Bible, but David is the name of the character. I spent the day before David's funeral in a hotel room preparing for the eulogy. I don't know that I've cried that much before or since. As I thought about him, I realized what was gone from the world was a depth of goodness few of us had experienced in a friend. What was gone from the world was a quiet, unassuming man who believed love mattered more than personal glory. And I knew, at least for me, he'd been proven right. Had he been more impressive, I'd not have felt half the pain of his passing. It was his love for me that created the chasm and the ache. It was a struggle to think about David and compare his life to mine. More people knew my name, but far more people knew him. I wondered which was better, to have all the stuff we think will make people love us, or to have love itself. David had love. What was shocking, though, was what happened next. The small church where he pastored couldn't hold the number of people who wanted to attend the service, so they moved David's funeral to a baseball stadium outside of town. When I got there, news trucks were parked in the parking lot with tall antennae raised above the gathering crowd. The parking lot was full. So people were parked along the street to get to the stadium. And all this for a man who died as the assistant pastor of a church with no more than 100 members. I sat near home plate with David's family and looked out over the crowd. I felt small in that place. I felt small in my accomplishments, and I knew because it was a fact that love had won that day. Thousands of people had been deeply loved by a man who sought no fame and no glory. David didn't try to impress people. He simply loved them. And I feel like if there's any idea in your head that there's something that you're pushing for in life, that you kind of feel like if I could just get there, if I could just get into that room, if I could just get that job, if people could just see me that way, that I feel like gather around the circle and just listen to David in this dusty basement telling you, listen, you don't have to live like that. You don't have to try to win, and you don't have to try and be noticed. And that life will be so much more fulfilling, expansive, creative, if you would just get in your head that God can win and God can be noticed for it. That's the best life that we could live. And that question that kind of like goes through our head of how do I do that is answered by this psalm. If you want like an easy application, I'm not good at application because I hate telling people how to live their life. But if you want an easy application, how do I actually foster the kind of posture that David had? I feel like it's like, hey, just start by reading this psalm over and over and over again. David has this posture of listening. I've kept my feet on the ground. I've cultivated a quiet heart. Like a baby content in its mother's arms, my soul is a baby content. David didn't need to go anywhere because he was already content. David didn't need to prove anything because he already felt like he was totally aligned with the vision of God. God is constantly looking for people who care about what he cares about. And so when I think about us tonight, I just feel like what David is teaching us about what it means to be human, and especially within that, what it means to be ambitious, is he's just telling us, partner with God in God's story. Partner with God in God's story. Let's make God known. Give God the glory. Let's help God win, and let's make sure that God is noticed for winning. I promise you, you will never live a more fulfilling life than that. I'm going to welcome the band back up on stage, and I'm going to pray. And I want to say this. I really want to kind of go after this because ambition's a weird thing to talk about. The reason I think it is because it's so deep-seated, right? Like it's very much tied to core identity things of who we are. And I know that there's areas of my life that I've surrendered, and I've seen that expansion, I've seen that bigness. But I know there's areas of my life that aren't surrendered, and I don't really see God move in those areas, and the same might be true of you. And so I feel like give the Holy Spirit some time tonight to do a little rooting around. My hope is that you would just offer up to God the idea, God, is there a place in me where I just don't let you into? Because the truth is I want to be seen, I want to be recognized in this space. there's sometimes things that we don't see until the Holy Spirit reveals it. And so I'm going to pray for us tonight that actually happens. And then we'll close it out.